Okay, I welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. This is an audio and video show where I interview a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. On each episode of this show, we talk to a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, we hope to uncover a new understanding of learning as conceptualized, imagined, and narrated by the guest in our show. Today's guest, Uday, was born and raised in Mumbai. He discovered his passion for photography while pursuing an engineering degree in the United States. An accidental encounter with a darkroom course in Irvine, Texas, sparked a journey that has led to more than 2 decades in documenting cultures and social causes around the world. He has traveled extensively around the world to places like Mexico, Ecuador, India, Bosnia, and he has this wonderful collection of photographs that I've spent a long time reviewing. And he also has a Substack. Again, I will be linking Uday's website, his writing, his photo archive on the internet in the show notes. So I'd highly recommend reviewing that either before you listen to this interview or after you listen to this interview. His photography has served as a cultural passport, breaking stereotypes and fostering a deeper understanding of the world. So, what's always fascinated me about Uday's journey is that in addition to being a photographer, he also had a long career as an engineer. And both these things ran parallel in his life. So, today we're going to unpack some of those things about his journey. But Uday, you are jumping in. Firstly, thank you for making time for this, Uday.
Oh, thanks, Abhishek. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, and as someone that's read your Substack and really enjoys your writing and photography, like one of the larger goals of this conversation is to understand the stories behind
Mhm.
how people come to be where they are today. So you grew up in Mumbai, right? So if we could
Right,
start
right.
off by maybe telling me about Uday as a child growing up in Mumbai. What were your memories of that time?
Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty happy childhood. So I had a younger brother who was a year and a half younger to me, and a childhood remembers. I mean, I remember my childhood pretty much spending time and doing fun stuff. We used to fight a lot and play a lot. And my parents, both my parents, were used to go to work. So most of the time, when we were not at school, we used to be at a daycare. And it was that whole coming of age and spending time with people of your same age in the daycare, just having fun with them. And I particularly remember when growing up, during summer vacations, we used to spend a lot of time at my grandmother's place, and she had a big front yard, backyard with lots of like mango trees, coconut trees, and banana, all sorts of trees. And one of the favorite pastime was to actually one of the coconut trees. We used to strip the bark of the leaves and use that as bow and arrow and play different characters of from Mahabharata and Ramayana. And so we were a handful, and till we got yelling and beating from our grandmother, we used to just play and stuff. So overall, a very happy childhood. A lot of time with my brother, and so growing up, we were very close, and that's how we kind of studied together, went to engineering. My brother followed the same engineering college, and when I went to the US, he followed me, and so that journey always kept us together. So yeah, growing up, um, yeah, I mean, I don't remember specifically from a photography perspective what it did, but it was a lot of um, just because we were so close in age, a lot of time spent together having fun. Uh, I still remember there's one incident my mom always loves to narrate is um, we were a handful, and at home we used to make a lot of trouble. And there was one time where we were getting on top of a cabinet, which was like a wall cabinet, and both of us climbed up on it, and it actually fell on the floor, and we were both underneath it. And my mom just thought that we just what both of us got just squished underneath, and we just came out like a bunch of rats just coming out of it, and worried that my mother is going to yell at, but she was just in tears, like seeing us alive. But yeah, so there were so many of these stories, and yeah, it's we were into a lot of experiments and stuff. So we used to um, try to get different things, like you'll pick up rock salt and baking soda and stuff, and try to burn stuff, and try to figure out what happens when you burn all these things together. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's what I remember from my childhood. Yeah.
for sure. And like in terms of your experience at school or there, like what
Hmm.
was some of the subjects you remember enjoying or some of the subjects you remember not enjoying, because a lot
Yeah.
of a lot of that leads into what you decide to study, in
Right.
your
Right.
college years. So I'm just curious about that mind at school.
Yeah, so strangely or whatever, but I was not a very studious student at school. And growing up, my dad used to always like, you need to study, you need to get somewhere and stuff. And my brother was not that. He used to be quite studious and stuff, but I was always not really good at it. And funnily, I never used to enjoy history and geography. And now I love history and geography. It's just like complete opposite. So I used to enjoy sciences and the math. So that's where I had decided like, oh, I want to get into engineering and stuff. And I used to also love baking. And so one of the things I remember fighting with my dad saying that I want to be like a cook or something. And he says, that's not a career. And so he had a bet with me. He said, if you don't secure enough marks in your 10th exam, then you can do whatever you want. But if you do, then you have to get into engineering. And so unfortunately or fortunately, I got good marks and then I got into engineering. But yeah, I mean, from a subject's perspective, I used to enjoy sciences and math. I used to love physics and stuff. But strangely, I never enjoyed geography and history. But come to think of it now, I enjoy those more than, I mean, I still like sciences, but I just have a fascination for history and especially the merging of history and geography together. And so I read a lot of non-fiction books which have stories that kind of merge the history and geography together and stuff.
Yeah, I love that with it because it seems like you identify as a photographer, but you also had
Yeah.
this extended career as an engineer, right? And you are so comfortable in inhabiting both these spaces, in terms of your larger identity. And I'm just trying to understand, like, early on, in terms of, you said you liked physics and you liked math, like, was there a teacher that got you interested in those subjects, or was there an early experience, like a book you read or a mentor that sort of got you excited about one of
Yeah.
those subjects?
Yeah, so I think right around eighth or ninth grade or something, I had this. I used to go for tuition, for a math tuition, and we had this Raman sir who used to be really good at math, and he used to the way he used to teach you math, he used to be always excited about something. I mean, and before that, I used to think math was very dry and stuff. But the way he used to explain, be it trigonometry or Pythagoras theorem or something, and the way he used to explain um, was make it fun. And I think that fun aspect really got me into mathematics. Physics was something that I think me and my brother used to not necessarily read a lot of books on sciences, but it was actually practical, playing with things and kind of figuring out. I still remember we used to get this a lot of trouble with this one, but and my grandmother also had an old radio, and one of the favorite pastimes we used to do is actually dismantle the whole radio, a working radio, and then put it back so that it works again, just to figure out like how do all these parts come together and what happens. So I think it is more to do with like trying out things and playing with things that made us kind of interested, or at least made me interested in how things were from a science perspective. So I think it was less of kind of what books I read, but it was more about like trying, experimenting, playing around, more hands-on stuff. We also had an electrical circuit board, like a kids circuit board, and we used to like to kind of play around, connect the dots, try to see, okay, what we do this, like the fan will come on, the lights will come on, and so it was kind of playing around with all those things. So that's what I clearly remember.
How interesting. And like, you decided to pursue engineering, like I know that was quite some time ago, but like off the top of your head, do you remember something about Uday from those 4 years at engineering college? Like, what were some things you learned about yourself in that time? You can talk about both your undergraduate and your graduate experience, if you want.
Yes, yeah. So I think from the undergraduate, I clearly remember that I was not like an A student or something. I was an average engineering student, but I always liked to try different things. Even when I was at college doing my undergrad, when I say try, it was try some new approaches in how you approach a problem. I clearly remember there were times where I was submitting for papers for either competitions or to different colleges. And something that a lot of people in my college hadn't done before. And I wanted to try those things as a way of learning new things. At the same time, it was outside my comfort zone. So I was always like to push myself to try new things, be it engineering. And again, uh, I think it was the third year of engineering or something, and I had submitted a paper in physics, and though I was doing electronics engineering, and it got selected at BITS Pilani, and for uh, for me to come and kind of present the paper. And I remember going there with zero expectations, saying, "Okay, it's an opportunity for me to." I'd never gone to a different college and presented something, and though it was in physics, I had I think I had tried physics and a couple of other genres, and I had written stuff, and going there and giving a talk about it, presenting my paper and stuff. And then I think it was that day or the next day, I was just walking down. We were supposed to leave, I think, that night or the following night or something. And we were walking down with a bunch of friends in the BITS Pilani campus and seeing a poster, like a notice board with my name on saying that he won the first prize. And I was like, I mean, this is the day when you didn't have the phones or anything, and I think a notice board is how I found out and I was just so thrilled. I was like, okay, something I'd never imagined, and it when I that news came to college, everybody was like, oh wow, he submitted this paper, and nobody from the college had won this in a nice prestigious university and stuff. So it was for me, it was always trying something new, pushing myself to do even if it's not in my zone, trying something new. So that's one clear example I remember from undergraduate. From graduate study, it was more of survival because I was kind of getting. I went there without a scholarship, and then within a month, I actually secured a scholarship, and then working a full time job with not full time, but yeah, like a semi part time job with your workload and stuff. So it was surviving, but at the same time trying to learn new skills in a new country, which I remember, and again, kind of making new friends, trying new things and stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, I actually went to do my master's in a specific discipline. But when I went there, all my seniors kind of discouraged me, saying that, oh, if you take this particular course under this in this university, the professor is so bad that he's not going to leave you, like you're going to be stuck here for 5 years because that's how he has done for the past students. And then I had to rethink of, okay, I came for a specific specialization, and now I have to rethink how do I want to do this. And so kind of uh, maneuvering at the last moment, trying to figure out what's in the future, trying to figure out. And so I went from something which was in digital signal processing and something to do with chips and everything to a completely new field that I had knowledge, but I hadn't any background of. So that was telecommunications. But I had seen the signs of you all these new companies coming up with cell phones and stuff. So I knew that the cell phone and cell towers are going to be big. So telecommunication was kind of up and coming. This is back in 98, 97, 98. So kind of pivoting that. And so when I finished my graduate studies, I didn't have a problem finding a job because there were so many companies lined up because they wanted like telecom engineers coming out of colleges. So yeah, I mean that's kind of what I remember from like my graduate and undergraduate study. So
Yeah, and like because I know like post your graduate program, you worked for a phone company, and I'm curious, is that like a common experience, at least for a lot of engineers in that time? Because I think 98 was when the dot-com boom was also in the up and down sort of time.
Yeah, I think
It was
99 is when it started the dot-com boom, and then I think
yeah,
20, like 2000 is kind of when the bust happened.
yeah.
But yeah, there were a lot of internet companies coming up and stuff, and especially in the Bay Area and stuff, there was a lot of companies. So I got out of college through campus. I got into Motorola, and it was yeah. So a lot of my friends were getting into like Ericsson, Motorola, Dell computers and stuff, and it was just choosing between one of those. And so and Motorola, Ericsson were pretty big, and they were kind of booming at that time. So uh, I don't necessarily remember about so much about the dot com that time, because I think dot com came a little later, and it had to do more with the internet bubble as such. And the field that I was in was had to do more with telecommunications and cell phones and stuff. So that was still booming and didn't have any issue till quite late in the 2000s.
And like but they're like for someone that's just immigrated, to the US or any other country, we often
Yeah,
hear about the positive parts about immigration. From your memory, like what were some of the things that you think were challenges that you had to navigate in your early years, and some of the things that you think, were benefits of, moving to another country and starting over again? Like, you spent a good 20-25 years in the US and you've recently moved back. But I'm just thinking about if you could reflect on that time and tell me about uh, what were those early working years like for you, and your memory
right.
of, what was it like in a work environment, mental health wise, work wise. So I'm just trying to see what was that early years as an
Sure.
immigrant like for you.
Yeah, so I think I'll go back a little, even before joining Motorola. So when I was a student itself, I mean, you feel an immigrant right from there when you're a student. But unlike, um, I mean, I one good thing I did was I didn't go with any preconceptions of this is how I am expected to behave, or this is what I'm going to see and stuff. I went with a very open mind, and I think anybody who travels, and you know that you have done that also, when you travel abroad and you intend to live there for a considerable period of time, you have to be very open minded about how things are. You have to look at it in a positive manner. There are things which happen, and I didn't. For me, I had never experienced any discrimination or anything as such, and I think part of the reason was, I mean, at least America is a land of immigrants, so anybody you look around are immigrants in some form or fashion. Whether they came their first generation or maybe they're the 10th generation, whatever. So generally, you don't find an issue. Um, and when I was in college, also, when we were doing graduate study, my boss was a Japanese lady, very, very strict and really nice lady. And that's where I kind of learned how to kind of behave properly. Uh, like I clearly remember when I went for the job interview at her place. This she was in the business administration of the college, and the only request she made is, I know Indians come late, so make sure you always come on time for the job. So I said, yeah, yeah, you will never have that complaint from me. So my shifts always started at 8 a.m. in the morning, and I had made sure that I was there like a minute or 2 minutes before 8 a.m. So never had a chance for her to kind of complain about it. But I don't remember any untoward incidents or anything as such till 9/11 happened. So I was there during 9/11, and I clearly remember a time where I think I was visiting, I think it was a liquor store or something, after about 3 weeks after 9/11 happened. And I was in an aisle, and this guy just like literally rushed at me, and he said, "Are you celebrating because America has got hurt and stuff?" And I was like, I didn't know what to do or what to say, and I just taken aback. And the store owner just took him out, and he said, "Sorry, he's upset about something, but don't mind and stuff." And he just apologized for him. And I think that was the only incident I felt. But it was a time where everyone were on their nerves and edges and stuff. So I mean, that was totally understandable. I've heard other stories in other places also. I clearly remember a friend of mine during the COVID time. She's an American. She was living in Udaipur, and she was saying that I had been visiting Udaipur for the last 12 to 15 years, never had this issue, but suddenly during COVID, she got people started yelling at her saying that you brought COVID to India and stuff. And it's during the dark times when people just show their sometimes people show their ugly side. And so I almost treat that as an aberration because other than that, everything else was didn't have any. It was always welcoming, and people think Texas is a very. I mean, it is a red state, but my experience always been that Texas people are uh, very warm and fuzzy, and they're very homely, and they make you feel nice. So whether it was work or outside work, anywhere I went, it didn't have. And as I said, I did my photography through a community college in Irving, Texas, and those were some of the best years of my life where I kind of that whole uh, mingling with people from different countries and learning different skills and stuff. It was kind of a very eye-opening experience.
Yeah, and I think that's quite refreshing to hear as well, Uday. You know, the many narratives that exist within our larger narrative of a particular place or a particular
Right.
region, right? I think what you said about Texas being so much more than the narrative you hear about it in the media is true and applicable for most places in the world, right? And we're
Yeah.
often we often take up the dominant narrative, but I feel like if we're able to understand the how the individual sort of stories come together in such uh, sometimes difficult, sometimes fascinating, sometimes uplifting ways, right? There are so many stories within that larger sort of story of what a place can be. And you know, you were at Motorola for about 7 to 8 years, and then you moved on to another company where you were working as a senior developer. You were still in Texas, and then the last 8 years or so of your career as an engineer, you had moved to Massachusetts. So, you know, Texas and Massachusetts, like these are two different states, but you mentioned something about this community college experience. You know,
Right.
what made you want to go to a community college and learn photography? Like, I want to know what was the story behind that course, and why did you take it up?
Yeah. So, I mean, it just happened by accident, actually. So this is back in, I think, sometime in 2002 or something. And a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, he was saying that he was planning to take up this photography 101, or I think it was called as black and white class one or something. So he said, I'm planning to take that. Would you be interested in taking along with me? And I said, what is it about? And it's like, oh, they teach you how to take pictures. And I was curious, but I wasn't sure. And I said, I have the time. Maybe I should try it. And um, it was funny that we took the class together, and that was the only class he took. And I took that class, and I took classes in that community college for the next 6 years. So it was a journey that I never expected to take that long, and it was such an amazing experience. It was where they taught you how to process your film, how to develop it in the dark room, how to print it in the dark room, and so it was something that was so unique and fun that and anybody who has actually done any darkroom processing knows this when I'm talking about when that image comes to life in the in the dish where you're processing and it comes alive. There is no greater joy than looking at your own print come alive. It almost feels magical. So I think that's where I fell in love with the idea of photography. Though now, if I look back, I don't like to spend time processing so much than actually the act of making a photograph. But so that's how it started. And the great in the US at least, community colleges are a great place where people who are working professionals can take up classes in the evening. So you could have a class for salsa, you could have figure drawing, you could have pottery classes. So photography was one of that, and it's also not very expensive. And so you have like-minded people who come take a class, and it's generally for like 3 4 months. You meet twice or three times a week, spend 2 hours, and so it's not a heavy commitment, and it's more fun. And it's all up to you how much you really want to push yourself. And I think I remember my professor, a teacher who was teaching this photography class. He was a very old guy, maybe in his mid 60s or something, and he was a taskmaster. And I clearly remember he was so serious. Like people, he was like, "Oh, we are just taking it for fun. Why is he so serious about it?" And I, for some reason, had taken up his sincerity to like, okay, we need to do justice to what he's teaching. And I used to be a very studious student and trying to make sure that, and he used to make us like, I remember just printing a 4 by 6 print and spending 3 to 4 hours in the lab just to get it right. And it was very frustrating, but at the same time, learned a lot. Like basically, you're just using all the Photoshop techniques that you do it on a computer, but you do it in the dark room. And this was my first time, so it was kind of so much harder. And trying to go out, and he says, "No, this is not right. You need to make this darker, lighter," and you go back, restart everything, and do it. So I learned a lot of stuff from that, and then kind of going forward, it was like, okay, what's next? What can I learn new in photography? And so the darkroom black and white was kind of a stepping stone. And then as I took classes, it was trying to learn different genres of photography and different techniques. There was studio lighting that I learned. So I I would say the community college experience kind of taught me a lot. And then there was a point, I think after 3 4 years, they ran out of all the classes, the courses that they could teach in photography. But I was like so hungry. I used to tell my professor, like, I want to still take classes. Like, how do we do this? And so they literally made up classes for me. Like they said, okay, since you are learning, let's say documentary photography or project-based photography, we'll create a class for you. You just sign up for that class, and you come and you pick a project, and we will kind of work towards that project over the course of 3 months. And that's what we did. I think last 2 years or something, I think I must have taken 4 of such classes which were offered, which was not really in the syllabus, but they just created those classes. And I was so grateful because uh, the school environment kind of gives you this whole uh, place where you are thriving with curiosity and you're learning from each other. They had an excellent lab. Later years, we used to do digital printing. They had this excellent lab where you could print pictures. And so I used to do my project pictures as well as like personal pictures. I was like, okay, I have this lab, I should use this. So yeah, so the community college taught me a lot. I mean, and most of my photography, what I've learned is through that community college experience, I would say.
And it seems like such a safe space because I'm thinking about till that point, a lot of your learning and education was in some way utilitarian, right? Because it was you
Right.
had to get an
Yeah.
education to get a job. But in
Right.
this 6 year period, it seems like because it was beyond your job, it was sort of a hobby, passion. I'm wondering, like in your mind, Uday, at that time, did you think that this would become like something you'd want to pursue professionally in addition to engineering, or you thought you were just doing it because to stay committed to something for 6 years and doing different courses in it, like what was your thinking about what you wanted to do with
Yeah,
photography at that
so
time?
I never looked at it from a professional perspective. For me, it was more of, oh, I'm enjoying it so much, I don't want it to end. I think that was the thing that was in my head. And it was all as I said, the college environment and the people I met there, I've made so many friends there, and I'm still friends with them. And so I think that environment was more to do with like it's a continuous learning. And I tell everyone it's like photography or any art form for that matter. I think it's a continuous learning, and that's how you get better at it. So it was me trying something, getting it reviewed, critiqued, printing it, uh, figuring it out. Does this fit in this whole project or not? And so going back and forth, going basically that rinse and repeat loop that I was trying to do. At no point did I actually thought like, okay, I want to kind of think it as a career because uh, I knew what the options are. They were very uh, far and few between. It was not easy to make money out of it, especially. I think in the later years, I was more interested in like photojournalism and documentary photography, um, and even back then, the funding was getting cut, like places as Nat Geo and New York Times, and I know Dallas Morning News. A lot of people got laid off and stuff. So I knew the writing was on the wall on, especially when digital came in. It was becoming extremely hard for long form journalism, what they call, is to survive. So though I was very much interested, for me it was more to do with I want to learn this, and my and this passion is getting funded by my engineering professional job. So I think nowhere did I thought that, okay, I think eventually in my head was like, okay, if I have made enough money, then maybe I'll do this as a hobby, continue doing this as a hobby, but not as a profession. So though saying that, I did have a photography, I had a studio in Dallas where I used to take up events and stuff, again, to kind of fund my other projects. So yeah.
Yeah, and like because you were also learning photography at an interesting time in history in terms of technology. Like the early 2000s was when you were doing this course and you were doing it into the early 2000s, and around 2008, 2009, leading into most of the 2010s, you had all these social media tools that developed this promise of capturing photos really quickly. Social became a big thing. Like if you were learning photography again, in today's
Mhm.
era, do you think you would go back and learn it in the same way you did at that time, Uday? Or do you think there were benefits of learning it in the way that you learned it? Uh,
So yeah, so that's a very interesting question because I this was, I think it was late last year or middle of last year. I met this um 30-year-old guy who from Indonesia, and I had gone for a workshop in Indonesia, and he had just learned photography and practicing for the last 2 years with him. Kind of, we had this whole conversation of how did he, like I was telling him my journey, and I was asking like how did he learn, and he was like, oh, I learned photography from Instagram. And I'm like scratching my head. And so for him, the whole reference was everything that's on the Instagram is is what his inspiration is, not anything beyond that. And I felt that was so limiting. And I think I told him, and maybe this is your generation or something, but I would, if I were you, I would go back and look at the photographs from the masters and look at photo books and study from that, because there is so much to learn from that. And part of the journey that when I was learning photography in the community college was actually um, to study these photographers from photo books, or when our instructor used to say, hey, you should study Robert Frank or Mary Ellen Mark or Bruce Davidson and stuff. And these are big time photographers. Some of them are no longer there, but their work is a legacy that you have to understand where they come from. And when we generally look at a photograph, a lot of people who are young and upcoming, they look at people, when they look at on Instagram, they are looking at a single image and someone made that image, and they think that is the like end all, right? Versus when you look at someone's work, a legacy, you're looking at a body of work which spans for 50, 60 years. And so you're looking at consistency, you're looking at their mindset, you're looking at a thought process, you're looking at a lot of other things than just a single image. So I feel like, and that goes for new generation, but I think if I were learning photography in this generation, I would still try to look at all other avenues, not just social media. And in fact, I always tell people social media is the last place you have to look at, because a lot of times social media only it you're going to see only what's being pushed by the algorithm, right? It's very hard to seek something out there, versus you can always go to a library or a place where they have all these photo books and you can actually look for what you want and look through it and take your time. And nobody is putting like buttons on on those pictures, right? So you're looking unfiltered, you're looking at unbiased, versus when you're looking at social media, you're looking at, oh, this post has 10,000 likes or a million likes, and then you automatically get biased because you think, oh, there's something to this image, why everyone likes it, and you start thinking that there's more to it than what I understand. Versus, I feel like when you're looking at a photograph, you shouldn't have these biases coming in. You should look at what makes you feel when you look at this image. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, like, and as you were saying that, Uday, I started thinking about my experience looking at your work as a photographer as well. And I was looking at some of your early sort of projects and looking at your more recent projects, and also looking at how with your writing more recently,
Hmm.
the narrative behind the photographs were also coming through. I'm just curious because I was reading some of your essays before we did this interview, and I was reading some of your quotes about photographs, and this was something I got from one of your essays where you said a photograph is not just about what is happening in the frame, but what it suggests. Or there was another thing that you wrote: photography at its core is about presence, being there, observing and responding. And then I really enjoyed this, joy was in letting go of control and allowing the work to lead me somewhere. Like my question over here is a little bit more open ended. Like
Hmm.
post 2008, 2010, when you started doing these projects along with your full time job, if you can
Right.
chronologically take me through, some of your your photography projects or collections, and tell me,
Hmm.
some stories behind each of this, because you've mentioned you've traveled to Bosnia, Mexico, India, Ecuador, but I'm sure within Dallas and Massachusetts, when you were working, you were doing lots of
Right.
like local projects in those places too. So, if you could tell me how the your voice as a photographer, like your
Hmm.
like, because I feel like you do have an opinion on the kind of photographs and the kind of legacy you want your photograph your larger collection to leave. And I think we've had a couple of discussions before this about your work with, creating like an archive that people can
Right.
come to in the future. So how
Right.
did you come to understanding what is your voice as a photographer? And if you can tell me that through your projects over this 10 to 15-year timeline.
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember the earliest project as such was, I think, back in 2008. I think it was 2008 or something when I took up a workshop, and the workshop was going to be done in Ecuador. And that's where I actually worked with this NGO, which was kind of helping out kids who are either mentally or physically challenged, kind of get over what their problem is and helping them and helping their families and stuff. So I was part of this workshop, which kind of said, okay, you could work with this NGO and kind of produce a work. That workshop was for about a week's time, and that's where I don't know if you've seen the story of Mateo on my Substack, but Mateo came from that, where I I photographed the NGO and I was photographing the kids there, and I happened to see Mateo, and then I talked to the head of the NGO saying that would it be possible I can meet Mateo's parents, and then I went to their house. And she helped kind of broker the conversation because back then I didn't understand any Spanish, and so kind of helping, trying to bridge that gap and explaining what my purpose was there. So I think that experience with kind of working with this family whose kid was suffering from cerebral palsy and seeing the challenges was a very eye-opening experience, especially from kind of learning. It's almost like on the job. How do you learn empathy? Like you go with don't know how to respond in a situation like this. And it was when the workshop had started, and they'd say, "Hey, you're going to be working on this NGO, which has it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be challenging and stuff. So figure this out." I actually was very hesitant, not because because of the condition. But I felt like I'm going to go there and there's going to be kids crying, and how am I going to respond? How do I actually work? Because when you're photographing, you're trying to tell a story, and I didn't want to tell a story that narrates a very sad kind of story. I wanted to kind of tell the story of the NGO who's doing a very uplifting job. But surprisingly, when I went there, the kids and the staff made me happy, because there were times when they were not happy, but most of the times they were laughing and making the kids laugh, and they were doing all these activities and stuff. And so it kind of taught me that don't go with preconceived notions of like what your project is going to be. Just keep open minded, go there, and you'll be surprised to see what happens. So I think that journey helped me get over this fact. And so I went there. I enjoyed that. I pushed myself, tried to get into personal spaces. But then at the end, when the project came out, it was so touching that I clearly remember we had at the end of the workshop, we had an exhibition of everyone's project, and we had invited Mateo's parents, and his mom just bawled out because she had never seen her kid's picture on a wall in a gallery exhibition, and she was saying my son looks so pretty and so nice, and so she was very happy. So it was those experiences kind of built that, not only the confidence but also like gave me this, like, okay, the sense of purpose, right? It's like, why are you doing this? Like, there has to be greater purpose than the point was not like, oh, I'm making pretty pictures or making a picture that someone says, oh, wow, it's a great picture. But it's that experiences that I want to. So for me, it was like, let me try to do to these, either these workshops or go to different places. So I was focused on trying to get some cultural experience, some social or social economic experiences in different places. And it's kind of harder to do it in America unless there's a protest or something happening. So within, whether I was in Texas or whether I was in Massachusetts, it was not that easy to do projects locally there. I'm sure there are people who do it, but I didn't doing a full-time job and just having time over the weekend was not possible. So any project that you see, whether it's Ecuador, Bosnia, Mexico, those are all on my personal vacation time, where I used to take up my vacation, go on these projects, and try to pursue it. So, and Mexico is another place, like that's a country that I'm just in love with. So, just because the whole cultural experience, it's very similar to India in the way they kind of treat their families and extended families. They're very family oriented, maternal instincts. Food is really amazing. So, I've gone many times and tried of different projects out there, but again, it's that cultural exchange, learning something new, getting that exposure, and doing everything through photography. It's almost like it gives me a, as I said, as you said, right in my bio, it's like it gives me a passport to kind of go and explore something new. So I think over a period of time, whether it's from there and then try, and the Bosnia was a completely different project. So I had looked up a work of photographer, I'm not recollecting the name now, who had done extensive works on the Roma community. And Romas have a very interesting history on how Romas came to Europe. I mean, they basically migrated from India, and then so the Banjaras who migrated or persecuted, they got migrated and went to Eastern Europe, and a lot of people got settled. And then they kind of that language got mixed in with some of the Eastern European languages, and so they don't really speak what Banjara speak here, but there is a mixture of that. But they look a lot like Indians and stuff. So when this workshop came about doing something in Bosnia, I asked specifically saying that I would like to, if it's possible, try to like explore the possibility of working with a Bosnian Roma community. So this group actually put together something, and then they got me in touch with this NGO which was working with this Roma community, and so I went and kind of almost on a daily basis documented what their life was. This one specific family, there were actually two families, kind of work who were neighbors, and the kind of photographing their dynamics, what they did for a living, what was their daily chores and stuff. And it was very, again, a very interesting experience, kind of almost like a window into a new world of trying to understand it. Again, not going with any preconceived. I mean, I used to do some of the research, but when I went there, it was more like, okay, let me understand the ground truth rather than coming up with what I've read in articles or websites or something. So again, that kind of led to other projects and stuff. So it's been a continuous learning and continuous exposure to different cultures and experiences. To your question about finding your voice or how it has evolved, I would say it has. Uh, it's a lived experience, right? So it is as and when I was going through my photography journey, any experiences that I was doing was getting reflected in the work I was producing. So I cannot compare something that I did 10 or 15 years back to something I'm doing now. It's very different. Again, I am very different as a person in my life right now at my stage versus what I was back then. So some of the, I do feel like some of those experiences were very raw. At the same time, they were less guarded and they were more me back then than now. And I feel like sometimes when I'm doing it projects now, I'm more sanitized and I try to make it proper, what they call like, oh, it's not breaking rules, but oh, you need to be this way and that way. And so sometimes I feel like I'm much more rigorous now than what I was. But when I looking back, uh, I love my projects and photographs more from the yesteryears than now. But again, it's also the when you're looking back at time, you're looking back with the nostalgia of the memories more than the actual photographs. And I think memories have that tendency as they grow older, they go fonder. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was just reading this book called A Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes. And in the
Okay.
book, the it's a story of this old man that remembers a particular incident from his early teens and childhood in a
Right.
way that it did not actually happen. And
Hmm.
and like one of my takeaways from that was that maybe humans are not archivists, they're sort of storytellers. And I was just thinking about, I also was looking at this research by this psychologist whose name was Elizabeth Loftus. And she wrote this
Okay.
book called The Myth of the Repressed Memory, where
Uh-huh.
she said that it isn't always accurate to rely on humans for eyewitness testimonies on which you make legal judgments, because sometimes when we try to remember things, it's not often accurate. We remember it based on a narrative that we have about what we want that incident to sound like. And it also got me thinking about the kind of life we portray, even on social media. If you look at an app like Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Very often these are highlights of very particular moments of our lives. We don't naturally steer towards putting up difficult moments on these platforms,
Right.
which
Right.
which I think is a fabricated version of what real life is actually like. Because if you are constantly exposing yourself to a platform like that, you assume life is just wonderful and nice for most
Yeah.
people, right? And I think when you reference the fact that it's so important to go back and see the works of the masters, or look at things in photo books, I think there, because you're producing it across a larger spectrum of time, and you have a larger vision with what you're trying to say as a story. I think the onus and responsibility is on you as the photographer to communicate something that is actually important. And I found that conversation you had with Mateo's parents really interesting, and that's what my question was for you now. There's that, in terms of the subjects that you are capturing through your photographs, what are your post photo conversations with them like? When you show them the photographs, like, if I know maybe you can't share names, but have there been negative experiences in terms of their reaction? Have there been lots of positive experiences? And how do you navigate that as a photographer, where there is a subject that you're capturing, and the conversation you have with that subject post the photo being taken?
So unless I'm specifically doing a documentary work, a lot of my work is something that I don't interact so much with the I hate to call subjects, but the
Yeah.
people I photograph. Uh, but if it's a documentary work that is specifically about them, then yeah, I do share it. And most of the time, I think as long as I'm not portraying that them in a negative light or something that will make them look bad, and if I'm just stating facts, and sometimes facts are hard to process, they might be hard for them, but as long as I'm being sincere, I think they realize that my sincerity is there. So I've never had a negative experience saying that, why did you take, I don't look good in this, or you shouldn't include this in this. So I've never had that conversation with anyone. In fact, I have had the other ways that I didn't even know you were photographing this moment, and it's such a nice moment that I would remember for life. I clearly remember this one project I did. She was a she was a photographer friend of mine. We went to the same community college, and we took a couple of classes together. And she was pregnant. I think she was about 5 months or 6 months pregnant, and she came to me saying that, "Hey, Uday, would it be possible for you to photograph my baby shower?" And I was not interested in photographing her baby shower because that is something that didn't interest me. But I just thought to things like, okay, she's asking me to do something that's important to her, and I don't want to say no to her. But at the same time, I wanted for me to go beyond what she's asking. So I put a proposal to her saying that, would it be possible that I actually photograph your whole journey till the baby's born? So not just the baby shower, but everything, including the labor. And so she literally, without thinking, she said yes. And I said, no, I don't want you to answer it. I want you to ask your husband if he's okay with it. Because especially in the US, in the labor room, except a family member, generally it's the husband, nobody else is allowed. And so, but that was something I had never done, and that was something I wanted to like experience it as an experience. So she said, okay, I'll ask my husband, and she came back, and you won't believe that was so a 6 month baby shower. Then there was another baby shower, what 8 months or something, and we did the labor. And then she's a Vietnamese family, and they had, after 1 month or something, they had this whole ceremony where they get the extended family, they all come and they do the welcoming of the baby. And so I did that also. So it was like almost like a 5 month journey together at different points, snapshots. And I did this whole project and gave it to her. And she said, you know what the favorite moment from the whole thing was? You actually photographed when I was holding my baby for the first time. And nobody else would have taken that picture. And thanks for making the proposal, because I wouldn't have thought about it. And this picture wouldn't have even been possible, because she was with her husband and nobody else. The doctors were there, but nobody was there to take a picture. But she's like, that is a moment I want to cherish, and that is a picture I'll cherish for life. So those are some of those moments where you surprise yourself, like with something that comes in your mind. And if you read the Frida story also, it was something that just happened spur of a moment. We talked about it, and again things happened there. But I always like to kind of be an open mind and try different things and push myself. And you never know, right? You come across some new unique experiences that you'll remember for life, and you make someone's life happy and people happy. So yeah.
For sure. I mean, thanks for sharing that. It is such a beautiful story, and I feel like that photograph, I'm sure, is on their mantelpiece somewhere, and it's something they'll hold on to. And even for that baby to grow up and see that photograph of themselves, I mean, it must be
Right.
such a surreal experience to see yourself in
Yeah.
your. And surprisingly, I don't have a photo like that. I mean, not surprisingly, because there's obviously maybe not a photographer, but I have a photo with my family a few minutes later,
Oh,
where
okay.
the family is in like the delivery room and my sister,
Right.
my dad are just holding me. So, yeah, that's one of my most special photos for sure. But I wanted to ask you about like capturing photos of the self and your family there. You've done some
Mhm.
recent work where you've been capturing photos of your parents, and I know there was an essay you wrote on Substack about
Right.
capturing your niece and your family in the US as well. So,
Right.
like, what was your perspective going into that? Because that really hits home. It's very personal. And how has I know there is a joy in just capturing family,
Mhm.
and actually recently I was thinking about this. I just have this habit of capturing photos of my mom, and the other day I was just looking at photos of my mom, and I realized that the way she expresses emotions with her eyes are actually very different. So because I
Hmm.
captured like maybe 100 photos over like, 1 year, I realized that she has a specific expression for surprise, a specific expression for sadness. And
Right,
I never was able to pick this up on a day-to-day basis, but those photographs sort of captured it in time and space. So can you tell
right,
me a
right.
little bit about your journey sort of photographing
Yeah,
yourself and your
yeah.
family?
So, I mean, you bring an excellent point about what you've noticed, right? And that will only happen when you look at you photograph for a period of time and you look through it, and then you start looking for patterns and what's happening and stuff, right? So for me, when photographing my family was just kind of I was the photographer in the house who was taking pictures during birthdays and stuff, and it went from starting with that into so this is back when I was in Dallas and my brother's family was in Boston, and so even when my parents were not visiting us from India, when they used to come, it was all I wanted to make sure that I don't leave a single moment when we are together. So it was not really finding what moment or a special birthday or something. It was like, okay, they are there for 4 or 5 days and I want to make the most out of it and I'll photograph every moment I can. And when I started looking back at those pictures, I was like, okay, there is something to this. I'm enjoying it and I'm looking through and there's I can see the kids grow and stuff. So it just all automatically became a project where I said, you know what, if I'm going or something or they're coming, this is on top of my agenda that I have to do this. So one of the reasons of my moving to Boston and living with them was actually this, where I am going to be there and I'm going to photograph all the time and and kudos to them, they never objected. I remember taking photographs of so many of my niece and nephew when they're having a bath and everything, and they were such a cool parents that they didn't object and stuff. And it's those moments where the kids are having fun and you want to photograph that every moment where they're having fun and the parents are having fun with them, so you want to kind of have that whole dynamics show up. And uh, it's the thing with family pictures when you're actually in the moment you're taking, you're in the moment, so you don't realize the significance of it till few years later. You start looking at it as like, wow, like, and you start looking at patterns and stuff. And especially when loved ones like you've lost loved ones, then those images take a whole different new meaning to it and significance to it. So whether the passing of my brother and stuff, and when my sister-in-law and my niece and nephew look at those pictures, there is so much attachment and so much meaning to it that it just adds to, and that's one of the reasons also like photographing my parents was like so important. I was like, okay, eventually we're going to have people go away, right? So you want to make sure that you want to photograph every moment and try to then, as you said, the nuances, like what they mean through their eyes, if they're looking this way or that way or whatever, right? So it was almost like photographing your family, but you're trying to find yourself in those pictures. A lot of times my parents keep saying like, you take all these pictures, but you're not in the pictures. I said, no, I am in the pictures because in a way it is me who is doing this. So I'm also in the pictures and that's my expression. So I don't have to be physically showing up in the picture, but I am there because it is who I am who's taking these pictures and it'll show up. And you start realizing that when you kind of you go out and you're photographing other projects, you start like you learn this empathy, you learn about love, loss, belonging, and you kind of take those takeaways and you start putting those into other projects. And I think that's very important. I think every photographer should photograph their family first and foremost, and you learn so much more because that is actually the easy thing to do. You a lot of times we feel like we take it for granted. Like the home is where we always take stuff for granted. Like your mom's always cooking, your dad's always doing, like you always take this for granted. But I feel like if you're at home, and if you're a dedicated photographer, before you say, oh, I want to do this grand project that I have to go hundreds or thousands of miles and do this, let's focus on the home front. Let's learn what's in your immediate neighborhood and something in front of you, photograph that, learn from it, and then go and kind of take the life lessons there and kind of implement them. But yeah, so for me, it's almost like it's a never ending project where I just hope to kind of build on that archive. and eventually maybe the next generations will look at it and it's like it's almost like if I'm looking at an old photograph my great grand uncle or something took, and my mom's looks like a little 2 year old baby, and I was like, wow, like someone took that, right? That's why I can enjoy it, I can cherish that memory, even if I don't have any direct association with that memory, but at least I can almost imagine what my mom felt like that and what that time period was. And and especially when the photograph is an actual printed photograph, you can, it's very tactile. So yeah, and that's another reason I tell everyone's like, and I do it too when I feel like if a project is near completion, I'll make sure that I'll pick the 15, 20 best pictures from it and I print them so I can actually hold it in my hand, like like here, and then kind of like look through it, kind of sequence it, figure out if it's working, not working. Yeah, so I always feel like it's not just, especially in this digital age where things are so fragile and your hard drives can crash anytime. You should have printed work of your project because you spend so much time and effort in it that you don't want it to go one day that my hard drive is gone and I've lost it, even if you've made backups and stuff. I think
Yeah.
a printed photograph has so much meaning to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like someone was asking me this question, if there was a fire in your house, what are the first things you will take? And it's so interesting when you ask people this question, very often they'll be like, I'll take all the valuables, but also this family album of photographs that only is here. I'll make sure I take
Right.
that too. It's so interesting that people place so much value on this that it's the first thing you want to take when there's like a fire, in addition to you being safe, right? Because you know that is such a tangible part of your life that is with you and such a precious part. And it's so like I realized that I was so lucky that growing up my father never identified as a photographer, but for some reason he had this habit of just printing out photographs that he took, because of
Mm.
which we have a very large family collection of photographs of our childhood.
Means
And now I realize that maybe in those photographs, I'm actually seeing how my father looked at us. I'm not just seeing
exactly.
what happened in that time, right? Because
Yeah.
very often some of those photographs were just us running around or feeding, my sister. And I'm like,
Mhm.
how does someone have the intuition to want to capture this? Because I think the way a father would look at a child will be very different from the way a photographer will look at, capturing children in a scene, right?
Mhm.
And I'm like, that's so special. And it's so interesting that the fact that I have more photographs from a time when photography was not as accessible, and I have much less
Mhm.
photographs of my teens and 20s, when
Mhm.
social media and technology was so,
Right.
and there were so many hard disks that I've lost, which is a sad thing, with like
Right.
entire 2 or 3 years of my mobile photos, and
Right.
the hard disk just crashed. So now I don't have any sort of thing. And after that happened a couple of times, I did this habit of having backups of backups. But I just think that the print is such a tactile, important part of your history, which is,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
In fact, the exhibition that just ended at NCPA, Twin Sisters with the Camera, they were talking about this is work from the 1930s to the 1970s or something, and most of the negatives had were kind of lost or destroyed, but they had prints, so they kind of scanned those prints and they reproduced the work to show it. So you should think about, like, if you have at least the prints, you can reproduce the work, you can show it, versus if you, back then they had negatives, and negatives are probably the best thing than the printed stuff, but negatives also can get destroyed and they got lost and stuff. But in this case, we don't even have a negative, we have a digital copy, which it's just ones and zeros, and if it gets corrupted, it is, it can't be fixed. So it's I think that's why I think the importance of prints are so much more now than
right,
it was before. So I think, yeah, that's another project that I've started, kind of formulating a concept around behind this, where I call this the Photography's Legacy Collective, where I want to create this where photographers can kind of sign up for it, where they can say, you know what, whether during living or even after passing, that their whatever their collection is, it's archived, it's printed, it's curated, it's shown to the public and stuff. So it's some way of having access to the general public, because most most people, like most photographers, their loved ones wouldn't know where their pictures are or how to access them or what's important, what's not. But a collective or something who they work with, can collaborate with, would kind of know an idea about what work is important. They can kind of discuss and stuff. So I think, and especially if there's a way to not only create archives of that, but also create printed material and keep it as a physical copy, that's something that I think it's very important, especially in this digital age, where this whole concept of, if the photographer passes away and he has spent, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years of work, creating this amazing work, and it's going to just go vanish and nobody's going to see it. Or yeah, so I feel like it's something that has to be addressed. So I'm kind of seriously thinking of creating some kind of collective that to address this issue. So I'm still in the very um, nascent stage right now, but I'm hopefully I'll have something of a concept that can be implemented. And I need to get some signups from at least few photographers to start implementing at a small scale. But that's my concept right now. Of, like, not only mine but others work. How can you kind of make sure that it's a legacy is kept
Precisely.
alive?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great idea, and I think it's a great service to the community of photographers that spend their life actually documenting and archiving these stories. And I think these are important fragments of our history that someone has put in a lot of effort to capture. And
right.
I think it's important to uh, treat them like a historical archive and not just photographs, as you said. But then, just to respect time, one of the questions I really wanted to ask you, I when I
Yeah.
was reading through your Substack archives, I noticed there were some essays where you referenced other street photographers and other photographers that sort of inspired you significantly. Like, if you could tell me about your relationship with one
Mhm.
such photographer, and how, in a way, engaging with that photographer's work through their photo books or through their exhibitions or through their digital,
Mhm.
archives, were something of you engaging with them change something about your practice and perception of photography as a craft for you? Like, or it influenced or maybe shifted something in terms of, like, what you noticed in their work that you're trying to, sort of understand for yourself as well.
Yeah, so I think I would name two such photographers. So one is a street photographer. His name is Yash Seth. He's a Mumbai-based photographer, and I think Yash is a very interesting photographer. He's a very introvert guy. So when you actually meet him and you talk to him, he doesn't talk much, and but his work speaks volume. Like his work is so, I would say, is so unique that when I look at it, it just brings a lot of emotion, a lot of raw emotions, like, because he thinks outside the box and he photographs. So he's a what I call a true street photographer. Anything that you walk around the street, he will find interesting and he photograph. In fact, he makes it looks interesting, versus it might be something which is very mundane and something that you won't even give a second look at it. But the way he composes it, way he captures it, and makes it, it's very emotive. So I think that's one photographer that I would highly recommend if people are learning street photography. Go look at. His name is Yash Seth. The other photographer that is Indrajit Khambe, that I actually took a workshop under him this summer, and he's more of a storyteller, documentary photographer, but at the same time, not a very a person who is believes in literal documentation. And that's something I learned from his workshop, where sometimes when you're trying to tell stories about your parents and your loved ones, you can use metaphors and what it signifies rather than having very literal documentation. And so he I feel like he does that very well, very naturally. His sense of light and color is great. So, and he shoots mostly with his iPhone, but but the way he composes and the way he um, connects, like if you're looking at his pictures, connects this whole emotion is very, very raw. Again, it's very straight from the heart. You look at, you can immediately know what it is, and you can feel it at a very core level. So I think those two photographers, from a contemporary's perspective, I really like. So yeah, Indrajit Khambe and Yash Sheth, yeah.
Yeah, and I will be linking Uday's Substack archives and his website in the show notes. But Uday, if someone does want to learn about your work on the internet, like, could you just briefly mention what are the best ways to uh,
Yeah,
understand your work?
yeah. So I used to quite regularly post on Instagram, but I'm kind of not doing that anymore. So Substack is where actually I kind of I'm more regular. I have a website, but the website is has more to do with the completed projects than ongoing work and stuff. The Substack is where people can read about, and I almost feel like Substack is a place where its writing has become my way of seeing twice. It's almost like that. So when I write about it, I kind of put thought to the vision, and every time I write, I rediscover those photographs that I've actually made. So it's been a real joy. I mean, Substack was initially, when I started Substack 2 years back now, it was more to do with like, okay, I just want to write about my experiences or what projects I'm doing. But it's grown so much bigger where I'm engaging with the community, and it's almost teaching me to look at my photographs in a new light than what I used to see it. So that's, I would say, if anyone wants to kind of read about my thought process more than my photographs, but read about my thought process, I think they will come to know, understand me better through my Substack posts, which I do twice a month, yeah, every fortnight.
Oh, perfect. This is wonderful, Adair. This was such a nice conversation, and I'm glad we got to do this. This is sort of a video and audio archive of your thinking at this point of time. But I'm hopeful I'm able to do this again, sometime down the line where we chat
Yeah.
about some more of your projects. I'd also love to explore your writing process, and how you navigate, photography and writing. And I find that really fascinating because you're genuinely one of my favorite writers on Substack. So
No, thanks.
I hope you continue doing that. And for the listeners tuning in, please do stay tuned for more such stories from this podcast. And I will be linking some of the links, recommendations, and the website and Substack archives of Uday in the show notes. So until next time, thank you for tuning in. And Uday, thank you for making time for this.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Abhishek. It was a real pleasure and great conversation having with you. Yeah,
Perfect. Thank you.
yeah.